It took me years, I'll be honest with you. I come from a background in military, also in marketing and high-level sales. So, going back 15 years ago, I had a very, very fast-paced mind. I don't know if you can relate. When I started studying applied psychology and philosophy, I only started studying and researching mindfulness as a discipline probably maybe 8 or 9 years ago. But because of the foundational understandings that I already had, drawn from research, philosophy and psychology, I was able to very, very quickly and easily make sense of the concepts that I was studying, I was seeing, I was reading about. All right. I'd realised possibly a decade ago that whilst I was growing in a lot of knowledge, I was starting to get smarter, I was starting to understand myself more effectively, there were some basic skills that I hadn't yet developed that were undermining some of my relationships. I was just able to identify that I had a gap. I've got some room for improvement here. And I guess this is going to be the first thing that we're going to have to identify if we are to grow in life, that there is a void, there's opportunity for us to grow and develop. So I'd identified there was a room for a lot of improvement in my relationships. There might be room for improvement in some of yours. When we learn how to listen mindfully, we learn how to hear people. There's a big difference between listening and hearing. All right. Also, it's important just to note here that sometimes we will listen avidly to that which is going on inside of our head, and this can become our normal. We're so used to the noise and the busyness inside of our head that this sometimes compromises our ability to listen well to other people. Now, as managers and leaders and people in positions of authority or influence, we can't afford to do this. All right, so this is one of the most valuable skill sets that we can develop by learning how to listen mindfully. Now, what I want to propose here is it's not for me to say, here are 3 steps to listening well. Rather, I want to present you with a number of ways in which we listen, seeing if you can evaluate honestly what your current approach is, and then make a decision for yourself about how it is that you might want to change. All right, you become mindfully aware of how it is that you might want to start changing. Because teaching is my responsibility, but learning and growing in application, well, that's your responsibility. Yeah? See where we're coming from here. So listen, I'm here to build you up, friends. I'm here to build you up. The first type of listening I want to highlight is discriminative listening. Now, there's a pretty good chance that you will know 1 or 2 discriminative listeners. And it involves effortless listening. We're not making any effort to understand a person, or another person might not be making any effort to understand us. I'm sure you can already see 1 or 2 people in your mind who do this. And what we hear are only sounds and noises. Right? So perhaps you're in the boardroom, or you're in a meeting, or perhaps you're engaging with your kids or with your team, and they're all speaking, they're all saying some stuff. And all you're hearing is that blah, 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 blah. Can you relate? Sometimes it's easier, isn't it, just to shut off and be there in body, in presence, but we're just not there in mind. In mind, we're somewhere else. We're put on the show. We're trying to be someone that we're not. And it's an expression of discriminative listening. It's effortless. We're listening to the noises. We're listening to the sounds. We might also, through this process, be more focused on what we're thinking about than on what the other people are talking about. And this will then kind of compromise our ability to hear and understand people. All right, to hear and understand. So when we are being discriminative, what we're not going to be able to do is hear what's actually being said or understand what's being said, because we've already made some sort of evaluative judgment. Makes sense. So then we have comprehension listening, which lives on the opposite side of the fence. This is when we are fully invested into listening, right? With intentionality, we're working hard, right? This relationship's important to us. We have a genuine desire to understand and gain insight. Now, not all people have this, all right? Depends. The adversary of our mind. All right, comprehension listening is about us being fully invested into hearing, understanding, and comprehending people, circumstances, situations. All right, which we're only going to be able to really appreciate if we understand and can identify what discriminative listening might look like. Now you see the words that I'm using here. Then we have critical listening. We'll sometimes only listen to information or concepts or proposals or pitches, not to understand, not because we're interested. Some people listen only to criticise. So the critical listening involves us evaluating, judging information that we're hearing for no other purpose than to form an opinion about. I like, I dislike, I agree, I disagree. That's a very low-level way of listening and learning and understanding. All right? You kind of get this in school. School children who will bicker and debate with each other. Well, I think this and I think that. And what's happened? What do you think happens in a debate when two people are debating with each other? It's an expression of communication. Well, when have you ever known two people in a debate to the point where one person says, you've just debated me to understand something new. That's right, your debate's been so fantastic, I am now willing to completely change my outlook on life and perspective. It very rarely happens, does it? Because the debate is about me imposing my perspective or my opinion or my understanding onto you. Your opinion, your perspective, from my perspective, is irrelevant, all right? So when we're listening critically, what we're listening out for is anything that contradicts our current outlook on life, right? From a very defended place, if that makes sense. So then we have appreciative listening, right? Again, appreciative listening. Think about how it is that you might communicate with people in your place of work, and then think about how it is that you might communicate with your kids at home or with your spouse or with your parents, all right? So what I'm saying is here, we all know how to listen differently in different contexts and different relationships. So appreciative listening happens when we appreciate what's said if we already appreciate the person. We can't engage in appreciative listening if we have no appreciation for the person. Now, right now, this is going to be an interesting one because you might not have any appreciation of me. You might barely know me. You're still working out whether I'm a credible teacher, guy or not, right? Which is fine. But then think about how it is you might engage and listen to your kids. If you love your kids and the kids are speaking, and if you're disciplined enough within yourself not to be distracted by mobile phones and all that kind of stuff because you love your kids, you appreciate your kids when they're saying some stuff. You know they might not necessarily have the vocabulary to say what they mean, so you want to understand, to appreciate them, to show them that you appreciate them. All right. So we'll listen sometimes, slow time, so this other person actually feels appreciated. It's not about us, not about our understanding. It's about their experience of appreciation. Make sense? This hopefully resonating with you on some level. Then we have biased listening. Biased listening, a little bit like critical listening, is where we hear only that which validates our perspective. All right, so I teach mindfulness. I teach a few of the personal growth, applied psychology disciplines. And a few years ago, I started teaching neuro-linguistic programming. What I very, very quickly discovered was that a lot of people in the world don't have the best of understandings of what neuro-linguistic programming is. As I've done further research, I realised there's a lot of highly manipulative teachers and instructors out there teaching all sorts of whacked out abstract concepts. So when I created my first online training course for NLP, the feedback that I got was from people who hadn't taken the course, said, Why are you teaching that? That's manipulative. This completely undermines everything that we thought you were about. I thought, pardon? But you haven't watched the course? Why would you say that? Because I realise that people listen from a place of bias, all right, hearing only that which validates our perspective. All right, so if I have a perspective, if my perspective, if my assumption is that you're a highly ineffective person, then it doesn't really matter what you say to me, right? I'm going to be treating you as if you are who I've already assumed you are. Does that make sense? All right, so for us to listen mindfully, we're going to step out of all bias. But we can only step out of all bias and all degrees of discrimination if we're aware of the ways in which we are biased. So evaluative listening, seeking to evaluate the truth about what's being said. As you're most likely already aware, this is very different from many conventional mindfulness teachings. All right, why? Because you don't need deep breathing techniques. All right, what we need insights into how it is that we can start growing and developing and improving and maturing as human beings. All right. Dialogic listening. This is when we are listening to relate to what's being communicated. And again, this can be useful. Sometimes it can be detrimental. Say, for example, you perhaps do a little bit of mentoring or coaching in your role. Now, if you're a leader or a manager, we can't really operate in a place of leadership or management without, in some way, operate as a mentor or as a coach, right? It just kind of comes with the territory. So it's useful to be able to engage in dialogic listening, where we're listening to relate to what's being communicated. Now, it's important to understand some people are going to have some circumstances, some experiences in life that we just can't relate to whatsoever. All right? They'll have gone through some stuff that just we haven't gone through, right? And such is life. But dialogic listening is about us relating to what's being communicated, and if we can, empathically putting ourselves in this other person's shoes, appreciating that whilst we can't appreciate the extent of what their experience is, we've had a similar experience, and that's all that we can relate to, if that makes sense. So we're listening to relate to what's being communicated by whatever means necessary. We can only do this as we seek to put ourselves in their shoes, right? To look at the world through their eyes, to hear the world through their ears, and ultimately experience life through their experience. So our perspective, our bias, our comprehension, our appreciation, our stuff becomes irrelevant. They become the primary focus. Make sense? And then we have relationship listening. And if you'll notice, these two are very much they both walk hand in hand. Relationship listening listens with a priority to build trust and strengthen a connection or bond. And this is more of a standard, right? It's a habit that we can build into our life. And it's one that, it's not like there's 5 steps you can take to to develop relationship listening. It's all about your priorities, right? The question that we really need to benefit from asking ourselves is, how do we want to be experienced by other people? Are we not bothered? Are we here just to be authoritative? Are we here to be the boss? Are we here to assert our authority, our power? Or do we actually want to take a more relational approach? Do we want to be loved by people? These ideas work their way into all business, leadership, management teachings. So we've all been influenced in our thinking to some degree by that which we've already heard. All right? But now I'm hoping you can appreciate that, yeah, we might have a certain way of listening. We might have a habit or habits in some areas. But when we become more mindfully aware of the extent of the options that we actually have, we can start setting some new standards. Okay, so perhaps in the past I've been a bit more critical of my thinking. I might have been biased in my thinking, perhaps critically or seriously evaluative. And whilst these expressions of listening may have been useful, may have served me in the past in some areas, perhaps now, in order to become more influential, as I'm changing, as I'm growing, as I'm developing, I might want to change my listening communications approach.